it is, in recent months, we have talked about wrestling in the Indian context. The one thing that has, of course, dominated the discourse has been the fact that, well, the wrestlers have been protesting against, of course, the current, let's say, regime that has been in place, and they've been demanding plenty of changes in the Wrestling Federation of India, not least the fact that the incumbent president, Brij Bhushan Sharan Singh, should not only not be allowed to contest elections, but should also be ideally, put in a sort of a police custody and thereafter investigated due to multiple cases of alleged sexual harassment. Now, there's been very little focus, understandably so, on let's say the on-field or on-mat action in this case, because A, there haven't really been those many meets that have been happening, and two, the meets that have been happening understandably have not been attended by a lot of the top wrestlers because they have been more occupied in the protest to ensure that the WFI gets cleaned up, and that whoever it is takes charge of the WFI next can run it in a proper manner that is, of course, whilst including the best interests of the wrestlers. However, this has actually ended up putting the, let's say, IOA, the Indian Olympic Association, in a little bit of a pickle, and what's worse, it's left the careers of a lot of wrestlers in a little bit of a flux heading into what's a very important year, because there's, of course, an Asian Games that is going to be held later this year, and 2024 is the year of the Olympics. We're going to go into some details as to why exactly that's the case and why it is that the IOA as well as the Olympic Committee of Asia, who are, of course, the hosts and the caretakers of the Asian Games, why it is that there's been so much back and forth between both of these parties, why it is it's still ongoing. There's a lot of things to divert and to discuss. But first, let's look at what exactly the situation is and how it stands right now. Now, the Asian Games of 2023, it's fair to say, is in a little bit of a flux, especially when you consider the wrestling side of things. Right now, there is no clarity whatsoever on which wrestlers will be participating and in what events. And the reason for this is, of course, that there have been no trials that were held. Now, keep that in mind, of course. Those trials are a very, very important part of the story. And there have been no trials held up until this point, despite the fact that the last date for giving names for any, let's say, the wrestlers who will be competing, or for finalizing the names, is July of 23rd. And if you know, as of this recording, it is July 8th. So it's really not that far. In fact, it's just a little over 2 weeks from now, wherein the deadline for submitting the names of those wrestlers is about to expire. So obviously you'd be thinking there'd be a bit of rush and a little bit of panic, but truth be told, there is a little bit of panic, but there's not a lot of rush. Why exactly is that the case? Well, that is because the IOA had actually asked the OCA to extend the date of the last date for submitting the names of the wrestlers. Now, the IOA is at this point asking for a final date of August 15th. The reason for this is because they want to be holding the trials from 5th to 15th, and thereafter on 15th itself submit the final names of the wrestlers that they want to be sending as part of the contingent for the Asian Games. The reason they have done this is down to, of course, a request from the wrestlers, and you remember that right now the WFI is basically run by an ad hoc committee that has in essence been put in place by the IOA. So really the two-member ad hoc committee is directly reporting to the IOA, and therefore it means that the wrestlers and the IOA are in a lot of contact. So this entire request has come down from the wrestlers because they have said that, look, we've been busy protesting, we've been busy trying to clean the sport up, and therefore we've had no time whatsoever to actually prepare for the trials. So all they're saying is we don't want to skip the trials, but at this point we're very much underprepared. We're not at all match fit, we're not at all match ready. Give us a little bit of time to get back into shape, move forward from the protest, and actually get to the point of being able to compete once again, and then we'll give the trials, and then you can solidify off the list of names that you want to be submitting for the Asian Games, which, truth be told, is an understandable, let's say, request, but it's understandably also not gone down well with a lot of wrestlers. Now, other wrestlers are definitely not happy at this entire situation due to the very simple fact that, well, they see it as an unfair bit of favoritism that is actually being given to the wrestlers who were protesting, because it is worth remembering that whilst there were a vocal minority of wrestlers who were protesting, a lot of them, while sympathetic to the cause, were actually choosing not to protest but also train at the same time to ensure that they would be match fit and match ready to be able to represent India at the Asian Games. So obviously that is something that, you know, they would be feeling was a little bit unfair, because they've been preparing for this entire thing for years, and their preparation has also been jeopardized, because truth be told, the trials should have been happening at around this time, but unfortunately they're not, and there's still no certainty as to when exactly the trials are going to happen. So they're seeing this as obviously a little bit of favoritism, and they're not happy about this. These are the internal rumblings. It is worth noting that there aren't many high profile wrestlers right now who've spoken out about this in public, but there is a bit of an undercurrent that the biggest loser from all of this is, of course, unfortunately, Indian wrestling as a whole. The reason for that being is that whilst it's commendable and absolutely understandable that the protesting wrestlers were focused on ensuring that the WFI gets cleaned up, their let's say request to postpone the trials, was understandable, has caused a lot of chaos, because, well, it's not necessarily protocol to let's say postpone trials like that. And what's to say, or what's to stop other nations within the Asian Games to actually, you know, make a similar request later on from the OCA, and then say that, look, if you could approve it for India, why can't you approve it for us? It does open up a major can of worms, and unfortunately it's not a good look from a sporting perspective, even though you can understand the reasons why it is they've pushed to ensure that the trial date gets pushed back a little, and that the final date of submitting the names gets actually pushed back. The sad reality is that right now we have no clarity on this entire situation. Yes, we know this is how things are, but we haven't heard from the OCA whether or not they'll extend the date. There's been no talk whatsoever on when it is that the trials can be held, and therefore there is absolutely no clarity whatsoever as to who exactly the wrestlers are that India will be sending for the Asian Games, and that really is just a little bit of a shame. It's an unfortunate situation that we hope can get rectified soon enough, because again, time really is of the essence in this entire matter. We hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, please don't forget to like it, share it with your friends, subscribe to the channel, tap the bell icon, leave us a comment, follow us on Instagram, Twitter and Facebook, and don't forget to download the AajTak app as well. Plus, if you're already on the channel, go ahead and check out some other videos that we've done. But for now, from my side, it's goodbye.